am, yeah. Cool, all right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for skipping lunch for me, or at least extending it. Endpoint superpowers on the cheap in Splunk. So a little bit about myself. My name is Olaf Hartong, working for Deloitte as a specialist leader in their blue team. I do a lot of IR, forensics, hunting, whatever I can get my hands on, basically. I also lead a SOC at a financial institution. I used to be a documentary photographer, so I'm not that schooled in InfoSec. And I'm a dad of 2 boys, which I love to bits. Happy to have them. So talk about today. Of course, it's attack related, so I definitely have to highlight that. Then a little bit about Sysmon, what it is, why would you use it, and how would you configure it, or how I prefer to do it. And then the threat hunting app on Splunk, which I built, a little bit why I built it, what my challenges were, and a demo, which is hopefully not too long. So why am I here? Well, I got accepted, right? So that's cool. And it's the endpoint. So first of all, how many red teamers are here? Ooh, all right, couple smart guys. So these guys want to get in, right? So first of all, they usually get onto the endpoints, and there's a lot of solutions. Some of them are really great, but they're costly. So a lot of the EDRs, they're really nice, but not everybody can afford it. And it's not always the quality that you're looking for. So I tried to build an alternative approach, which you can even use coincidingly. And it allows you to leverage a data platform that you probably already are using, a SIM, or in my case, Splunk. You could also do it on Elk, but then you have to do a lot of the stuff that I'll show you later yourself, but definitely worth doing. So a little disclaimer, it's not a magic bullet, it won't save you, you have to do a lot of stuff yourself. It's basically, you should see it as a tool that has a lot of tripwires, which you can then use to investigate further and hopefully find bad stuff. So attack, I'm not going to explain what it is, everybody should know. It's super hot right now, everybody's using it, every vendor's on it, definitely go for it, right? Everybody should dig in. But what I want to say is, no, not everybody uses attack in the way I think it should be used. I think there's 3 applications for it. So you can use it for alerts, basically in SIM, EDR, whatever kind of tool. There's a hunting capability that you want to be utilizing, and there's a lot of forensic capability you can use. So basically, it's unreadable, of course, but the darker the color, the better your chances are that you'll find it with that way. And alerting looks a little bit grim that way. Doesn't have to be, but this is approximation, it's a guess. So definitely combine these efforts. That's all I wanted to make sure. So Sysmon, probably most of you know, but anyway, it's a free tool. It's built by a couple of very small people at Microsoft. It's released under the sysinternals license, which is kind of important in a way that, in terms of support, right? Microsoft provides support on all their tools. Sysmon definitely has support, but it's different. Whenever you ping Mark with a bug, usually with a couple of days, there's a fix, and you have a really good version. It's using a device driver, which is load on boot time, and then there's a process service next to it that writes everything to the event log for you. And this is the important part, which you have to configure, because if you do it basic, then you don't get the data you're probably after. So this is an example event. Again, you can't read it, but it's really rich. It's really great. So that's why I'm such a fan of it. This is an example process flow created by Roberto, which shows all the relationships that it can have from a process only. So there's DNS stuff, there's IP connections, there's file streams, files written, and so forth. So really, really, really rich, valuable data source. So speaking of data sources, as Jared mentioned in his talk this morning, in MITRE there's a data source reference, and this is super useful. This is a graph depicting all the mentions of the data sources. So the higher the spike, the more references there are in the attack technique. So there's 169 references to process creation events. Super nice. Okay, so let's see what Sysmon does with this. Quite a lot. It's not perfect. It won't give you every data set for that technique, but at least it will provide you with some valuable metrics. So this is a bit of the history of Sysmon. built with some help. There isn't that much documentation, sadly, but this is all accurate. So there's approximately a new feature release every 6 months, and then there's some bug fixes, there's some smaller additions. Last Thursday evening there was a new push. So in the previous push there was the original file name added to it, which is awesome. Whenever a red team or an attacker renames a binary that is on the system, you'll still get the original file name in there. So if command.exe got renamed to hellokitty.exe, you can still see it was command.exe basically. Sure, you can change this, but most of the attackers are lazy, so they won't do this. And the DNS events are new, which are super nice, and they're connected to the process that did it, actually. And this is really powerful, because there aren't that many EDRs that are able to provide that data for you. And then the latest version that was pushed on Thursday, you got a couple of new filters, which are really cool. If you can see at the bottom, if you can read it, there's a contain all, which is basically like a poor man's regex. So you can semicolon difference or put them in between, so you can get multiple parameters, but not necessarily in the same order. So if an attacker is smart, he knows that the normal order is whatever is there, he can change it up, and a normal detection won't see it. This way you can. And the most important one, the really nice one, is finally we have rule group nesting, where you can do and or combinations. So you can do process with a certain command line and only log that, and you don't have to have all that shitty noise that you probably get from some of the things like LSAS being dumped. You can have that, but you don't have every access to LSAS, which you really don't want to have. So getting a config, this is going to be complicated, especially with the new stuff. You don't want to maintain a huge blob of config which you'll end up loading, because it's getting messy, right? So what I wanted to do is create a modular approach. I wanted to map everything to attack, and I want to maintain it, of course, so that's easier. And especially me as a consultant, I work for a lot of clients. Everybody has certain different things of filtering. They have maybe a proxy that you don't want to have, or all kinds of other stuff. I can basically build a directory for them, flick it in there, generate a new config, get it out, and I have my neutral base again, which is applicable for everybody. So it kind of looks like this. I have a directory structure basically for every event type that's there. I have a merge script. Awesome. Thanks for Matthias. I'm not sure if he's in the room, but he helped me out building a nice merger script to cobble everything together in a proper XML formatted way. And there's a complete generated config for the people that still want to be lazy and just use that. Perfectly fine by me. It works, so I use it a lot. And then within every directory, I segregate everything in different blocks, which are the modules. So I segregate them on include and excludes. And then within every example, there is, for instance, one where I exclude Splunk, because Splunk as a parent is noisy as it can be, as Jason mentioned yesterday. So I exclude it only for the process creation events, right? But if he starts doing some network connections, I'll see him for sure. So it's fine. It's a trade-off. I don't want to have, especially on Splunk, you don't want to log everything, because nobody's a millionaire. But still, you want to have the valid stuff. So you have to make decisions. Sure, they can bite you somehow, somewhere. But then hopefully you'll have some other stuff in place that at least will cover the rest of it. So the same for the includes. And this is nice. This is a feature that was added, I think, in version 8, where you have the name annotation. So every rule that is useful for me and where I can map it to attack, I try to map it to the closest attack technique possible. So in every event log, you will see a rule name field which has these two parameters in there. So you can also search on that. It's not always accurate, sure, but most of the time it will at least give you a direction to see what it could be used for. So I talked a little bit about data volumes. That's important, especially on Splunk. On Elk, it's less of a hassle, but you want to keep this at a certain pace. You don't want to flood yourself with a lot of data, because A, you don't want to use, you're probably not going to utilize it, and B, it's going to cost you. So in this example, this is actually from a client. this is only a server selection, and it's generating about 25 megabytes a day per server, which is fairly acceptable for any organization. Clients and workstations are usually a little bit less because they have, well, most of the people are just working in a browser or in SAP or whatever. So then it's even less. So it's actually quite usable. But then you want to do something with the data, right? So I started building an app, and my goal was to create an investigative workflow which contextualizes a lot of stuff for hunters or whoever, red teamers. I got a lot of good stories that people also use it from a red team perspective, where they see how noisy they are, which is actually very cool. And pun intended, I wanted to work with mandatory learning. I don't like AI that much. It has its uses, but not for hunting, in my opinion. But it will force you to get to know your environment. So definitely, if you don't know your IT team, buy them a beer, buy them coffee, whatever. But these are the guys that will be able to explain a lot of things that might stand out to you, which is actually normal in your environment. And it will save you a lot of time digging through a weird PowerShell script that looks weird, but actually is just, I don't know, a big fix edition or something like that. And there are no false positives. There are triggers or traps, or how you want to call it. And there will be a lot of false positive or triggers that are just common, which is fine. You'll be able to whitelist it, I'll show you. And again, attack was very useful for me, so it's very easy to correlate in that fashion. So obviously I had some challenges. Splunk didn't provide me a data model that I liked. Fortunately, Roberto created Awesome. So I started integrating that into Splunk, which is really, really nice, because now you can correlate different kind of events based on the same field name, which everybody that looked at Windows event logs knows that they aren't very consistent. So thanks, Roberto. I want to create a whitelisting capability, so I started out early, started creating whitelists for every search that I did, and I'm over 150 right now, so that doesn't scale, and it's a mess. So it took me a while to figure out a way to do this properly, which is there now. It really works, but all these kind of weird things caused me to basically rebuild the whole app from scratch because it was a mess, and I'm a terrible programmer. So I call this agile, or some people do, but it's really not. And there's still some technical limitation. That's partially my knowledge. And partially it's because every platform has its limitations, and there was a lot of evenings for the last 2 years spent on this. So, but that's not really a challenge. It's a lot of fun, really, trust me. So this is kind of an overlay of how the app kind of is structured. So there's the threat hunting overview, as I call it. It's basically the main dashboard, and from there on out you can go into drill downs, stacking tools. There's some basic hunt indicating shortcuts, which are also populating in the other ones. There's all the whitelists that you can edit. I got a bit of an about page where I show you if you have all the prerequisites set up properly and so on. So this is kind of my coverage right now. There's 144, 150 reports. These write to a summary index, which is kind of nice in Splunk, that you can utilize that so that it keeps the app a bit snappy. So I don't have to deal with raw data all the time. I have searches firing every 15 minutes that correlate, aggregate the results I want to see, write them off to a separate box. I query that, so then I can always augment it with real data again, but it's just a way to deal with it in a quicker fashion. And there's a couple of dashboards that do work with the real-time data, just because I didn't got to build the report yet. So demo time already, cool. Let's see. There we go. So on the top, there's a couple of filters that you can set, and then from left to right, there's all the attack tactics that I have coverage for that actually generated some data. So the numbers that you see on the big part are the numbers that happened that day. There next to it is the offset of the day before, and there's a line below that shows you all the data over the whole week. Then there's a top techniques triggered on the left. So all the techniques that are hit the most across your whole network will show up over there. And on the right side, there are the hosts that are impacted the most. So there's one host that clearly stands out. I'm not sure if you can read, but it's like 90K hits. So that's something you want to investigate properly. And then there's also a graph basically showing the same thing, but then on a time scale. And in this case, it's a very boring lab, so there's not much going on. And then all of a sudden there's a huge spike, so definitely go there. So I just clicked on the host name of that host that got hit the most. And on top, it's a bit unclear, sorry, but there's a bullet graph that basically shows you a bullet for every technique that hit over time. And the bigger the bullet, the more interesting it might be. And then going down, there's all this Sysmon-rich data, which is nicely structured. And then every time there's a attack technique, you can click everything. It will take you to the MITRE just to read up on it if you don't know what run-DLL32 does. Otherwise, Casey will explain it to you. And then it will show you everything that I believe is useful in investigating this further. So there's process command line, there's the original file name, there's the parent process. There are the process GUIDs, like the global unique IDs. These are awesome in Sysmon because that allows you to correlate across the whole tree. And there's a file hash. So you can click the file hash, it will take you to VirusTotal. In this case, it was command.exe. It's very fast, sorry. I wanted to cram in as much as possible. So going back to that global event ID, so there's one for the parent and one for the child. So you can look up and down all the way. So if you click on the parent process one, you'll see the global unique ID and the process that spawned from it. Ideally, you see one here because otherwise it might be injected or tampered with. Not necessarily bad when it's the vendor even does it, but it at least gives you a way of further investigating. On the right, there was the whole tree that is correlate or related to it, and then there's all the event types that are generated for that global unique ID. So you saw a lot of sub-processes instead of the one that we just clicked. And there's always the raw data that if it doesn't recognize the fields, you always have Google and GitHub. Just a useful way of, if you find a certain command line, you click it, you go to GitHub, maybe somebody wrote a script for it. So it gives you a little bit more context. Let's see. Right, so if there's something in there that you don't want to see anymore because it's fine, you can click on the time field in anywhere through the app, and it will take you to whitelist editor, populate the whole string for you. You only have to give it a valid reason, a better one than that I did there, submit it, and you won't see it anymore. And it won't be hitting the searches either, so it's also better for performance. Let's see, what do I do now? That's nice of a recorded demo, right? So you forget about what you did. Right, so okay, we're back at the computer screen. There's some process access stuff, so maybe there's access to LSS, might be Mimikatz, might be good, but you can investigate it. There's files being created, there's some exe files dropped, there's DLL loaded, all kinds of stuff that you might be interested in. There's a lot of network connections, there's some registry access, there's some DNS stuff. In this case, it's DNS over HTTPS queries. Not sure if anybody wants to have that in his enterprise environment yet, but again, something to investigate. So on the network connections, I clicked on the destination IP, and then in the middle you'll get a graph with all IPs connecting with that IP. And this is an external IP. Maybe interesting. And then on the right side, there's a Sankey diagram basically showing the same thing, but then also with the amount of connections. So the more connections, the broader the graph. And it will at least tell you something that if you only see one, then it's maybe not interesting, but if there's multiple machines connecting to that same thing with different usernames, yeah, might be suspicious. So if you click the IP again, it will take you to census, but you can change this for Shodan or whatever you want. It will give you some more contextual info. It's Amazon, so it could be anything. But at least it has, again, some more context for you that you are able to understand what's going on. So I might be interested in what happened with this process, what started it, what's the command line. And there's where the global unique ID, again, is very powerful, because if I click it, I now see that there's a process creation event actually tied to this. And actually a nice PowerShell command with the command line. Could be nothing, right? Maybe there's an admin really fancy, doing fancy stuff. But then again, so you have something to decode or go further, so I'll show you later. There's a couple of more drill downs. So there's also user drill down. You could have clicked username anywhere in the app. It will take you there and it will filter it. I took the lazy one, so I now filter on everybody. You shouldn't do this in a large environment, trust me. But basically what it's doing is populating a dynamic dashboard with all kinds of stuff. All the attack stuff that is related to that username, if you filter on my username, now you see all. On the left, you'll see all the machines that are connected to it, the failed logons, also where, it's kind of useful, but also the successful ones. So in this case, you see John Doe connecting to 3 machines, which is not a real name, of course. And then if you go down, which you probably can't read, but you also see there was an account created, it was enabled, there was a password set for it, it was added to the domain admin group, and it was deleted afterwards. So maybe, again, something suspicious, probably is. And then going down further, you also see some past hash activity, and then all the processes that are connected to it, the network connections that are related to that same user, and so forth. So then there is a couple more. There's file creation events, there's network connections as you saw before, named pipes, all in the same fashion, so everything's structured the same. And then, especially in the beginning, once you start using this app, I got 2 stacking dashboards because you'll get swamped with stuff. And this is a quick way to at least correlate a little bit. So it will count also the amount of times that it happened in the time frame that you've selected. So if something is very repetitive and you know it's safe, you only have to whitelist it here once instead of having to scroll through thousands of results. So it's just a quicker way of doing this. And instead of clicking on the time frame, you have to click on the count number, because I had to remove the time frame since it happens only once in a certain time frame. There's a thing with the whitelist, so you have to make sure that you again provide a valid reason, but you should also wildcard it on the right places, because some processes use a unique ID or something else in there, and you really don't want to whitelist it every time when it spawns, because then it's again useless stuff. So I have some some small extra indicators. So this is a dashboard that looks for tampering with Sysmon. It looks for changes in the config loads. Since Sysmon loads a new config, it will generate a hash for it, and it will depict it. In the middle, it's empty, but if Carlos is playing in your environment, then he will probably directly go to the registry. You'll see it here, because if somebody's writing to the registry for Sysmon and it's not Sysmon, I don't trust it. And then I have some lateral movement indicators, so if there's some WMI stuff or some WRM stuff that stands out, it will at least be populated here. There is some PowerShell events, and this is basically what I do here is I look for base64 blobs or download cradles. And I provide a way to immediately click on one of these base64 blobs, and I will take you to CyberChef there. Automatically decode it, so you don't have to copy paste all kinds of boring stuff. 2 minutes, good. I'll probably have to skip part of the demo there. I mean, this is just a very simple Cobalt Strike dropper, so it's nothing special, but once you've seen it once, then you'll immediately recognize it, so you go through it. I also do it for macros, so if you enable macros in Word or in Outlook, it will show up here, and it will actually drill down and look what happened afterwards, which is actually more interesting than just a macro. And then there's a couple more overviews, so I'll skip those. You'll have to play with the app yourself in the interest of time. So this is what it looked like when I deployed it at a client, first day in. It looks kind of scary, maybe. It's 347,000 things, but there's a lot of repetitiveness, right? Most hunters will know there's a lot of PowerShell stuff that's being ran constantly, and it's constantly the same thing. So with that stacking dashboard, it took me probably 2 days with some interactions with the ops team, and then I already got it down into the low hundreds instead of hundreds of thousands. So it's relatively easy, but it's something that you have to maintain and keep up with throughout the day. You don't have to be at it full time, but it will take you some time. but it will hopefully provide you with a couple of good indicators. One of the best things I had was I detected the red team 10 minutes after they got in, so they didn't like that. It was kind of fun. But afterwards, we worked together to see, okay, do you see this, do you see that? So we basically turned it into purple, which is actually very beneficial for the clients. So a little bit of roadmap stuff. It now does Windows event logs partially. It does everything Sysmon. But I want to keep on adding stuff to it. It does PowerShell basic stuff, but not really the transcripts, no full WMI. So Matt really inspired me there. I'll keep on adding triggers. It's 150 now. It can be 500 in a couple of months probably. And then if I have time, Brozeek, firewalls, whatever. So that was me. Thank you. You have time.